Hello and welcome to COVE. This is the audio podcast and YouTube channel that aims to entertain and inspire our audience through a variety of different entertainment offerings, including music, storytelling, poetry, special guest interviews, and this time, for the first time, we're inviting you along on a Carganilla family travel blog. Come along with us as the Carganilla family goes to Vegas, baby. Vegas.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Carganilla Online Variety Entertainment Podcast. Here's your host, Paul Carganilla.
Hey everybody! It's Paul, Everly, and Noah here. We're getting ready to hit the road for Las Vegas for
Titanic Con. It's a 3-day convention about the Titanic, and we want to bring you along with us.
Wow, that was good. So come along with us, and of course it's a 5-hour drive from where we live, so...
But with us kids, we're going to have to break it up.
The kids are generally very good on long drives, but I wanted to find some fun stops along the way to break it up. We grabbed lunch to go when we left town, and they enjoyed books, coloring, iPads, and a nap before our first stop at the iconic Peggy Sue's Diner in the small roadside town of Yermo, California. Peggy Sue's is a great place to stop, use the restroom, eat a meal, grab some ice cream, or just let the kids play and explore for a bit. Built in 1954, the main building is a cozy, old-school, 50s themed diner, complete with checkered floors, leather-padded booths, and a diner bar with 9 counter stools. The owner used to work in Hollywood, and the diner is filled with old movie and television memorabilia. There's also a more traditional pizza parlor and a large gift shop called the Five and Dime, which is filled with 50s-themed souvenirs, collectibles, toys, and an ice cream bar. Around the back, on the highway side of the building, is Peggy Sue's Dinosaur Park, a picnic and play area filled with bridges over a fun man-made waterway. There are small buildings, iron dinosaur and monster sculptures, and even a stage. Everly and Noah improvised their own 50s musical review. They also loved the animals. You could find live turtles and ducks for the kids to greet and photograph.
There were little duckies swimming in the water, and we chased the duckies all around. And then we went over a water bridge, and we found this huge turtle.
The turtle was just like sitting there, and it was acting like it was dead. But then all of a sudden it just started moving towards the water, and then it just jumped in. Yeah. And then there were all these cute little duckies. It was so cute!
After the stop at Peggy's, we were headed back to the highway when a small, closed fast food structure caught my eye. Now, the main marquee sign said Burger Den, but at the top, there was a sign on top of the structure, and it claimed it to be the original site of the first Del Taco. Now, if you know me personally, you know that I am a Del Taco fiend. I love the Del, and this was worth a quick stop to investigate. I was a little suspicious, so I put it on my Instagram story, and some of my friends did some research to confirm that, yes, this little shack in the middle of the Mojave Desert in Yermo is, in fact, a historical landmark in American fast food culture. According to the Del Taco website, 2 gentlemen named Ed Hackbarth and David Jameson opened the first Del Taco right here in 1964. With a menu of 19-cent tacos, tostadas, fries, and 24-cent cheeseburgers, Del Taco brought in $169 in sales on its first day in business, the equivalent of 900 tacos. It was awesome to accidentally stumble across this historic location. Soon we crossed the state border, and I stopped at Whiskey Pete's in the small town of Primm for Everly and Noah's very first steps on Nevada soil. When I was a kid, my dad used to bring my brother and I to Vegas once a year to attend a winter baseball camp that my uncle helped organize. And every time we crossed the border, we'd stop at Whiskey Pete's for a restroom break and to see the Bonnie and Clyde death car. However, this trip, the kids and I couldn't find it, and we learned it had moved across the highway to Buffalo Bill's. We hopped over to Buffalo Bill's, and that's where we found it. According to the FBI's website, Bonnie Parker was just shy of 5 feet tall, all of 100 pounds, a part-time waitress and amateur poet from a poor Dallas home who was bored with life and wanted something more. Clyde Barrow was a fast-talking, small-time thief from a similarly destitute Dallas family who hated poverty and wanted to make a name for himself. Together, they became the most notorious crime couple in American history, Bonnie and Clyde. Undoubtedly the most infamous criminal duo in American history, Bonnie and Clyde's crime spree began in 1933 and lasted a little over a year. They stole this 1934 Ford Model 40B four-door deluxe sedan from the owner, a man named Ruth Warren's garage in 1934. On May 23, 1934, a posse composed of police officers concealed themselves in bushes along the highway near Sales, Louisiana. In the early daylight, Bonnie and Clyde appeared in this automobile, and when they attempted to drive away, the officers opened fire. Bonnie and Clyde were killed instantly. At the time that they were killed, they were believed to have committed 13 murders and several robberies, burglaries, and kidnappings. Clyde's shredded shirt accompanies the car here at Buffalo Bill's. It has several ragged holes in both the front and the back, and Clyde's sister signed the inside of the shirt to attest to the garment's authenticity. The bloodstains are apparent, but time has faded them considerably. I told the kids these were movie props and costumes, and they might very well be. The car's legitimacy is rather complicated. Authenticity issues abound due to many fake versions of the car that were actually made for the movie Bonnie and Clyde by Warner Brothers in 1967. Who actually knows whether it's the actual car the duo met their demise in or a replica made for the movie? But the vehicle has 112 bullet holes in it from the 167 rounds fired that day. This car sold for $250,000 to the owners of Whiskey Pete's in 1988, and today it is on display, as I mentioned, right in the lobby of Buffalo Bill's. We made one last stop before reaching our hotel in Las Vegas, pulling off the highway in Jean, Nevada to visit a gas station. And not because we needed gas, but because we'd heard it was the largest Chevron station in the world. This convenience store, known as Terrible's Roadhouse, boasts 96 Chevron gas pumps. That in itself is pretty massive, but the store, whoa. With an astonishing 50,000 square feet, it is one of the world's largest convenience stores, complete with a ton of fun photo opportunities for the family. Inside the store, you'll find a replica "Welcome to Fabulous Las Vegas" sign, which is 1,000,000 times easier to get a photo with than the actual one on the strip. Walls of candy, race cars, James Bond movie vehicles,
aliens and Bigfoot and candy. Like walls and walls filled with candy. Tell us about that.
So there was so much candy.
Okay.
You could eat the whole wall.
I don't think anyone would want to do that, right, guys? Because that would mean you have a huge stomach.
I love my tummy.
But there's also everything you can expect to find at a convenience store. There's even a Red Bull lounge and a White Castle restaurant. Pretty much anything you need on your way into or out of Vegas, it's there at Terrible's Roadhouse. Considering all the stops, we made pretty good time, arriving at our hotel just after 7 p.m. The last time I was in Vegas was 14 years ago, and it was wild to see how it had evolved and seemingly built and expanded around and within itself. We checked into our stay at The Signature, which is an MGM property, a block deeper away from the strip, but still connected to the actual MGM.
I thought that it was also very amazing. The hotel we stayed at, you had to crane your neck all the way up to see the top.
My wife Jamie, who will be joining us Thursday morning on the trip, has become an expert in collecting and flexing credit card rewards points, and we were able to book our entire 4-night stay for free on points. Now, we might have to do an entire episode on taking advantage of credit card rewards points because it is an art form and it's a little bit of work, but it's totally worth it. We've enjoyed several hotel stays and flights this summer, all at no charge on points, and it's been amazing. I was a cynic for a long time, but now I know. Points are real. Totally worth it if you have the time to harness them. Check out this room we got. Again, 4 nights, no charge. Well, we had a full day. Time to rest and recharge. Titanic Con 2023 begins bright and early tomorrow morning. The first Titanic Conference took place in 1999, but it didn't become an annual thing until it was revived in 2016 with a small group of attendees and has grown each year, with the exception of 2020 due to obvious reasons. The conference usually meets in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, but since this year marked a very special anniversary, it was held at the Luxor, the home of Titanic the Artifact exhibition. What's the special anniversary, you ask? In 1998, 25 years ago, in an expedition headed by George Tulloch and Paul-Henri Nargeolet, RMS Titanic Inc. successfully recovered a 17-ton piece of Titanic's hull from the ocean floor. The piece had split off the ship when it sank in the early morning hours of April 15, 1912, and it rested in the darkness among the debris since then. In 1996, the first expedition to raise the big piece was unsuccessful, but the team returned for a second attempt 2 years later. As mentioned moments ago, the 98 expedition successfully recovered the big piece, and it is now on display in the exhibit in Vegas. How very exciting that many pivotal members of the 98 expedition were here in the building, set to give presentations about the experience during the conference, in the Luxor, the current home of the big piece. The man at the helm of the Titanic Conference since the very start is Bill Willard, a college physics professor with a passion for history. His experience with Titanic began in 1974, and by 98 he was deeply involved with RMS Titanic Inc. and the expeditions to the wreck site. After many years of research and dedication to learning about the people of Titanic, Bill compiled the book Our Story, about the raising of the big piece. My first contact with Mr. Willard came soon after I first discovered the upcoming conference. One day I had Googled Titanic Convention. I didn't even know there was one. I had no idea these were going on. And I think sadly a lot of people don't, but my Google search led me to Bill's conference website, voyagesexploretitanic.com. I had a few questions about the event and I sent him an email. He wrote back to me promptly and was so friendly and welcoming. Jamie and I soon booked our trip to celebrate my birthday week at Titanic Con 23. Conference Day 1, Wednesday, August 9th. The kids and I arrived at the conference room around 8 a.m. and we were welcomed by Julie Willard, Bill's lovely wife. She got us checked in and we enjoyed a delicious breakfast. At 8:30, the Titanic Con 2023 began with a welcome from Mr. Willard himself. Our first conference activity was a private attendee admission to the exhibit upstairs before it was open to the public. According to Luxor's website, this exhibit has been viewed by more than 25 million people worldwide, making the exhibition one of the highest attended in history. It boasts over 250 authentic artifacts recovered from the wreck site of Titanic, as well as extensive recreations of some of the most famous rooms of the ship. Altogether, this is an entertaining and educational experience perfect for all ages. This was my first time visiting the exhibit, and I was blown away by the extensive amount and variety of artifacts that have been recovered from the wreckage on the ocean floor. From blocks of coal, parts of the ship, furniture, diningware, passengers' personal effects. It was fascinating to gaze upon these items, imagining them in their previous states. From being brand new, being used for the first time on the ship's maiden voyage, to lying on the sea bottom for many decades, and now, right here in front of our eyes.
The Titanic exhibit was so cool. I loved it so much. My favorite part was when you went through and it had a display of like 5 champagne bottles, and one of them was actually still filled with champagne in it after 112 years, which was amazing.
I got to feel the iceberg, and the Titanic water was like below zero.
Some of the highlights for me were the grand staircase tile with subflooring still attached, the au gratin dishes that were found on the sea floor lined up like dominoes, and of course, the main attraction, the big piece. The big piece is a portion of Titanic's starboard side hull. Trimmed from the original 17-ton piece that was recovered, this 15-ton mass measures 26.5 feet by 12.5 feet. The visible portholes came from sea deck cabins C-79 and 81. I'll never forget entering the room and seeing it for the first time. The awe and deep sense of reverence just gripped me at my core. There's almost a palpable, tangible, haunting feeling, like you're sharing a moment with a ghost, or the spirit, or the collective soul of the over 1,500 people who perished on board. The glass in a few of the portholes is still intact, and it's crazy to imagine there were people who looked out these very windows in the northern Atlantic in the days before Titanic went under. Experiencing this, seeing this in person, was the perfect way to get the conference started, and I was very excited to learn all about the recovery and preservation efforts over the next few days.
The big piece was just so amazing. It stunned me so much, and that actually let me have a second thought about how big the Titanic actually was.
It was great, but you didn't get to feel it. You just got to look at it.
Midday break. We grabbed lunch at the Luxor food court and then went exploring. It was 108 degrees outside, so we stayed within the indoor walkways and corridors. The kids discovered the moving walkways, which provided endless entertainment. To be young again. Back from break, we started the afternoon session with a memorial for the men who lost their lives on the Titan submersible 6 weeks prior. Paul-Henri Nargeolet, mentioned earlier as a leader of the 1998 recovery expedition, was one of the explorers who perished on the Titan, and also a very close friend of many of the conference presenters and attendees. It was a beautiful tribute, and I feel blessed to have been part of it, present for it.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, we would like to remember those passengers of the OceanGate submersible Titan, and especially our friend P.H. Nargeolet. Author Kate Chopin wrote, "The voice of the sea speaks to the soul." Within us all is an innate desire to venture toward new horizons. We seek to boldly go where few have gone before. We climb our own Mount Everest. We seek to spin ourselves around, freed from a gravitational pull, and see Earth from beyond our atmosphere. And we also dive into the bluest seas to explore secrets resting miles beneath the surface. We are assembled today to honor a group of men who were diving to view the RMS Titanic with their own eyes.
The Carganilla family's hearts continue to be with the family of those lost and the entire deep-sea exploring community. The next three presenters were descendants of Titanic survivors. First, we heard from Julie Hedgepeth Williams. She told the story of her great-uncle, Albert Caldwell, and his wife, Sylvia, and their son, Alden, who were all passengers on the Titanic. The whole family survived. As I'm sure we've all heard, most men were turned away from the lifeboats, leaving women to be widowed single mothers. The fact that Great Uncle Albert was able to accompany his wife and child on the lifeboat is the reason Julie's book is called My Rare Titanic Family. As was the case with everyone I interacted with at the conference, Julie was a very kind person, taking time to get to know the kids and I in downtime, and we got a copy of her book and she signed it. It was a very nice pleasure to meet her. The next presenter was Frank Goldsmith Jr. Now, quick note for clarity, for the purpose of this show, for this podcast, I'm going to refer to him as Frank III. His father, Frank John William Goldsmith, was a Titanic survivor, and he was on the Titanic with his father, Frank Goldsmith. But if you Google Frank Goldsmith Jr., a whole lot of information about his father, the Titanic survivor, comes up. So for clarity, and I mean no disrespect to anyone in the Goldsmith family, but just for the clarity of this show, he will be Frank III. Now, his father, Frank John William Goldsmith, was 9 years old when he boarded the Titanic in Southampton with his father, Frank I, and his mother, Emily. The family held third-class tickets on Titanic's maiden voyage, and young Frank Jr. spent his time on board the ship playing with a group of English-speaking third-class boys who were about his age. They played cops and robbers, climbed the baggage cranes, and wandered down to the boiler rooms to watch the stokers and firemen at work. When the ship struck the iceberg late in the evening of April 14th, 1912, Frank Sr. woke Emily and Frank Jr., and they made their way to the forward end of the boat deck where collapsible C was being loaded. There was a ring of crewmen standing around it, letting only women and children pass through. Goldsmith wrote of the experience, "Mother and I were then permitted through the gateway. My dad reached down and patted me on the shoulder and said, 'So long, Frankie. I'll see you later.'" 70 years later, Frank Jr. could still hear his father's voice saying those words. Frank and his mother watched the Titanic sink from collapsible C, with husband and father Frank Sr. on board. Frank Jr. remembered the deafening roar of the crowd treading water after the ship slipped beneath the surface. Well, Emily and Frank Jr. made it to Detroit, where they lived close to the newly opened Navin Field, home of Major League Baseball's Detroit Tigers. Living close to the stadium kept memories of the night he lost his dad fresh in Frank Jr.'s mind. Frank III recalled at the conference,
"When my dad moved to Detroit, eventually, he lived about 2 blocks away from Navin Field, where the Detroit Tigers played. And every time somebody hit a home run or there was a great play, the crowd roared. That was the sound of the sinking of the Titanic to my dad."
Frank ended his presentation by singing a song that was written based on his grandfather's farewell to his father, "So Long, Frankie."
"I clung to my mother, stayed close to my dad. I can hear his voice to this day. If we get separated, there is nothing to fear. These are the words he would say, 'So long, Frankie. I'll see you later. Stay close to Mom as you can. So long, Frankie. I'll see you later. Be brave, my dear little man.' The men stepped aside, they lay last to be taken. The women and children would be gone and forsaken. In the safety of lifeboats is where they would be, not drifting and drowning in the dark freezing sea. The band kept on playing as the ship kept on sinking. Such bravery I'll never forget. Then I saw his hand waving in the midst of the crowd, and I read his lips as he shouted out loud, 'So long, Frankie. I'll see you later. Be strong and try not to cry. So long, Frankie. I'll see you later.' And with that, he whispered goodbye. The sound in my head like 1,000 men cry. A gigantic black shadow then filled the sky. As the stern broke apart from the famous Titanic, descending slowly in the deep, dark Atlantic. So long, Frankie. I'll see you later. My body's at rest in the sea." The sound of his voice and the touch of his hand are engraved in my memory.
I had the pleasure of meeting Frank later that evening. He is such a pleasant and sweet man. The third descendant to present was Joan Marie Pope Randall, the daughter of Titanic passenger Louise Gretchen Kink Pope. Joan's mother, Louise, and her parents boarded the Titanic as third-class passengers at Southampton. Her father, Anton, and his brother, her uncle, Vincenz, occupied a cabin on G deck. Louise was with her mother and Aunt Maria in a cabin at the ship's stern. Anton and Vincenz were awoken by Titanic's collision with the iceberg at 11:40 p.m. and ran to the ship's well deck, where they saw the iceberg. They returned to their cabin and quickly dressed as water began to pour into the room. Anton ran to his wife's cabin and woke its occupants. The entire Kink family made their way to deck, but Aunt Maria and Uncle Vincenz got lost in the crowd. Louise and her mother were loaded into lifeboat number 2, but Anton had to remain on deck. At the last minute, Anton jumped into the lifeboat as it was being lowered. In an interview with the Milwaukee Journal, he was quoted as saying, "A sailor took my child and handed her into one of the lifeboats. My wife was also helped in by the sailors. I was touched upon the shoulder and asked to step back, whereupon my wife and child cried at the top of their voices at me being left behind. I ducked down, broke through those standing about, and jumped into the boat as it was lowered." All 3 survived and were picked up by the rescue ship RMS Carpathia. Louise's uncle and aunt, Vincenz and Maria, both perished in the sinking. Joan still has the shoes her mother Louise was wearing aboard the Titanic the night it sank. She travels the world with them to help preserve the memory of the souls aboard Titanic. As far as I can tell, the shoes are currently on display at the Titanic Museum attraction in Branson, Missouri. I think Joan mentioned she was working on a book about her mother's story, but her presentation at the conference was a little jumbled at times, and I might just be confused. Regardless, she is a super cool woman, and it was great to meet her as well. There are only a handful of descendants of Titanic survivors still out there sharing their parents' stories, so getting the opportunity to meet both Frank and Joan here on the first day of the conference was super, super special. The final presenter of day 1 was Alexandra, or Alex, Foley. Alex was the communications director on the 1996 Titanic expedition. So this presenter immediately hooked me because I could relate with her professionally. For my day job, I am the public information officer for a government agency here in Southern California. I manage media releases and most public communications for my agency, so it was really, really interesting to hear Miss Foley's story. She fielded more than 16,000 media calls and looked after Titanic survivors and even former astronaut Buzz Aldrin, who all tagged along on the trip, hoping to be there among the first to see the big piece as it emerged from the ocean for the first time. Now, if you remember, that 1996 expedition was unsuccessful. Miss Foley, as communications director, organized a press conference in Boston and New York following the loss of the big piece that year. And what an incredible undertaking that must have been professionally, handling press for that whole situation. I give ultimate props and respect to this woman, and it was amazing to hear her talk about the experience. I got to meet a couple more awesome people that first day. Judy Preston Ince was a core extra who can be seen in the background of several scenes of James Cameron's movie. She is the author of the book, Living the Legend, and of course our COVE podcast subscribers will remember she was my guest in episode 3 of this show. We finally got to meet in person there at the conference, and that was super special. We also had the absolute pleasure of meeting Louis Abernathy. He played the vivacious Louis Bodine, Mr. Bodine, in the Titanic film. And he was actually a presenter on day 3 of the conference, so I'll talk more about him when we get there. Break for dinner started at 5:45, and it's important for me to note that each day of the conference concluded with 2-hour roundtable sessions from 7:30 to 9:30, in which attendees had the opportunity to meet, greet, and converse with presenters in a casual setting. Having the kids along, I didn't attend any of these roundtable sessions, but what a cool offering and opportunity for conference goers. The kids and I grabbed some dinner to enjoy in the room, and we spent the evening learning how to play Taco Cat Goat Cheese Pizza. A new game gifted by Auntie Sel. Thank you, Auntie Sel. So much fun.
Taco Cat Goat Cheese Pizza is a very, very fun game. It was the best.
How do you play it?
There's a pattern. It goes Taco Cat Goat Cheese Pizza, Narwhal Chipmunk,
The pattern,
gorilla.
The pattern is taco, cat, goat, cheese, pizza. So you take any card from your deck, you just put it down and say taco, next person, cat, next person, goat, next person, cheese, and so on. But if it's the actual one that you say, for example, if you put if you're saying taco and the card you put down is a taco, you have to slap your hands down on the deck, and then the last person to slap has to take the whole deck. But it's kind of like Uno. You don't want the whole deck. I did not regret playing it all the nights of our hotel stay.
Conference Day 2, Thursday, August 10th. Jamie's flight came in overnight. She joined us, and the Carganilla fam was whole again.
I got my coffee. Here we go.
Are you excited for Titanic Con?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, of course.
I'd like to add a quick side note here. Through the Luxor, the conference provided really great breakfasts for us. And considering Las Vegas's dining prices, this was a huge plus for conference goers.
I was nervous to go to Las Vegas because I'm in a car marshal, and my dad told me all they eat is broccoli in Las Vegas.
Yeah, that's the only food. They have broccoli smoothies and broccoli pancakes and broccoli ice cream and broccoli hot dogs.
I don't want to go to Las Vegas with you and Mommy tomorrow.
Oh. Are you sure?
When we went to breakfast, there was a broccoli sandwich.
The first presentation for Thursday, titled 4 Ships plus 60 Professionals plus 4 Objectives plus 1 Hurricane equals one heck of an expedition, was given by our conference godfather, Bill Willard. In this presentation, Bill gave a broad overview of the 1998 expedition and all the moving parts involved in raising the big piece. The 4 ships. Ship number 1, the Nadir, the base of the Conservation, a vessel of the French Institute of Research and Exploitation of the Sea, home of the Natil, a yellow, manned submersible capable of carrying 2 passengers and a pilot. Ship number 2, the Ocean Voyager, the center of all NBC operations, video capture, and production. NBC planned a live broadcast of the raising of the big piece. A live broadcast not only from a ship in the middle of the North Atlantic, but from the wreckage on the ocean floor, an extremely huge deal and the first broadcast of its time. Ship 3, the Petrel 5, used as a taxi ship and sleeping quarters for the expedition crew. And Ship 4, the Abil Supporter, I probably butchered the name, a vessel used to recover. This was the big towboat vessel that was used to recover the big piece, basically. The 60 professionals. Obviously, there was a long roster of personnel needed to crew these 4 ships and carry out this expedition. The 4 objectives: to conduct scientific investigations on the wreckage at the bottom of the ocean, to broadcast the first live images from the ocean floor, to raise the big piece, and to outrun a hurricane. That's right, a hurricane. It did, in fact, equal one heck of an expedition. And I mentioned it earlier, but you've got to get your hands on Mr. Willard's book, Our Story, celebrating the 20th anniversary of the 1998 Titanic expedition. It's available on Amazon. Pick it up. Our second presenter was Susan Wels. And no, not the Susan Wels from one of my favorite movies, Elf.
Guess what? I love you! I love you! I love you!
Wow, that was weird.
It's me, your son. Susan Wels had me, and she didn't tell you, but now I'm here. It's me, Buddy.
Susan Wels. You said Susan Wels?
Yes.
Who sent this Christmas grant?
What's a Christmas-gram? I want one.
This Susan Wels is a best-selling author, historian, and journalist. Her book, Titanic, Legacy of the World's Greatest Ocean Liner, spent 14 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. It was also a Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, and USA Today bestseller. Susan has worked on assignments around the world, and in 1998, she served as a correspondent in the Big Peace Recovery Expedition. She was sending in daily reports from the wreck site. Both Bill and Susan were super amazing and friendly people and signed my copies of their respective books. Thank you, Bill and Susan. At the midday break, we weren't super hungry yet, and Everly had been wanting to check out the Luxor's Egyptian exhibit, Discovering King Tut's Tomb. The King Tutankhamun, also known as the Boy King, ruled Egypt during the 18th dynasty of the New Kingdom. His tomb, discovered in the Valley of the Kings in 1922 by British archaeologist Howard Carter, contained a treasure trove of exquisite artifacts that provided valuable insights into ancient Egyptian art and culture. Unlike the Titanic exhibit, which is filled with actual artifacts from the Titanic's grave on the ocean floor, the King Tut exhibit at the Luxor aims to recreate the splendor of the king's tomb with replicas of his most famous treasures. It offers visitors a unique opportunity to experience the grandeur of ancient Egypt without traveling to Egypt. Although they weren't the actual artifacts, it was a fun, interactive, and educational experience, especially for the kids.
The King Tut exhibit was actually really awesome. There was this video that showed King Tut's skeleton, and I actually had no clue he was so messed up. His ankle was all turned around. It was sprained. Spine problem. I don't know. Those are only one of the few things.
Why do you have those problems?
Because he didn't take care of himself, and he lived way back in the old times when there was no cure for that.
Or no colors. The King Tut exhibit was amazing.
After the King Tut exhibit, we grabbed lunch at the food court and then we split up. I headed back to the conference, but in order to keep the kids entertained and sane, Jamie surprised them, taking them to a show that has been voted the best family attraction in Las Vegas, the Popovich Comedy Pet Theater. Entertainment for the whole family, this show features the unique blend of comedy and juggling skills of circus performer Gregory Popovich and the extraordinary talents of his performing pets.
The Popovich Pet Comedy Show was the best show I've ever seen in my whole entire life. It was this show, but it was like a play, okay? So it was a play. But you know how when you go to see plays like Fiddler on the Roof or Les Miserables, it's people who are the stars. But in Popovich's Pet Comedy Show, they were animals. Ponies, pigs, horses, cats, dogs, rabbits, birds, all sorts of stuff like that. And all the animals were animals that Popovich had rescued. And there were 14 cats, 15 dogs, something like that. It was just amazing. Yeah, and there was a parrot. It was amazing.
There was a pretend fire, and a little pet fire truck came, and the dogs rescued all the kitties, and a dog rescued one kitty, and the kitty was riding on the doggy's back. It was the greatest show.
It was the greatest show. I see what you did there.
The second half of day 2 of the conference consisted of 4 more great presentations. The first was all about conducting a live television broadcast from the middle of the ocean, presented by Bob McKeown and Meade Jorgensen. Bob McKeown is a veteran journalist who spent many years working on Dateline NBC, covering the World Trade Center attacks and the Oklahoma City bombing. Then, with CBS News, he provided award-winning coverage of the Persian Gulf War. He was also the first reporter to broadcast from the front lines of Operation Desert Storm. Meade Jorgensen started his career 43 years ago at the CNN bureau in Moscow and covered the Cold War as a cameraman, editor, producer, and correspondent. He's a 5-time Emmy Award winner with credits at 48 Hours, Good Morning America, and for the past 30 years, NBC's Dateline. These two broadcast professionals, legends really, shared their experience on the live television broadcast side of the 1998 Big Peace Expedition in their live presentation, Live TV from the Middle of the Ocean? No problem.
You are watching something that no one has ever seen before. The first live images from the bottom of the ocean, from the final resting place of history's most legendary ship, Titanic. I'm Bob McKeown, and welcome aboard Ocean Voyager, here in the middle of the North Atlantic. In fact, at the very spot where Titanic sank back in 1912. For the next 2 hours, you and we will be part of an extraordinary expedition that has brought together scientists and historians, some of the most sophisticated undersea technology in the world, and the people who operate it, and all to help us better understand what exactly happened to Titanic on that fateful night 86 years ago.
Next up was How to Survive a Hurricane at Sea. This was a panel discussion in which Bill Willard, Susan Wels, Saul Rouda, and Dr. Robert Budman discussed various aspects of, surviving the hurricane that hit during that expedition. This presentation was filled with amazing first-hand stories and footage. Saul Rouda was the sound technician on board for the expedition. He shared lots of his personal footage and a fun look at the experience from his unique sound technician lens. Dr. Robert Budman was the 98 expedition's physician. Imagine being the medic on the Titanic Big Peace recovery expedition in the midst of a hurricane. Very wild and interesting stuff. The next presenter was Joe Sembrat. Joe spearheaded and led the conservation efforts, including the raising, conservation, and mounting of the 17-ton hull fragment and many of the artifacts recovered during 8 research and recovery expeditions conducted between 1987 and 2010. He talked about the incredible physical and scientific efforts involved in conserving and caring for the Big Peace, the crazy chemistry-based side of the preservation efforts, and the ongoing care that goes into keeping it on display right here at the Luxor. It was all truly fascinating and super cool. The last presentation of day 2 was regarding the evolution of the Titanic breakup theories and the accepted SNAME MFC theory, or the Society of Naval Architects and Marine Engineers Marine Forensics Committee theory, presented by Robert Roddy and William Garzke. Robert Roddy has been the secretary of SNAME MFC and chairman of the Historic Merchant Shipwreck Panel since 2014. William Garzke is the vice president of SNAME and chairman of their Education Committee and Marine Forensics Panel. Mr. Garzke conducted forensic analysis on both the 1996 and 98 Titanic expeditions. Mr. Roddy and Mr. Garzke presented the most up-to-date analysis of the Titanic's collision with the iceberg, the damage to the ship, how it broke up and sank, based on all the evidence currently available to investigators. Their analysis was extremely thorough and fascinating.
I think we've seen a tearing apart of plates. The Big Peace is a good example of what we have seen. The forces that are involved here that rip the plates apart, pull rivets out of the plate, bearing failures, almost anything you can think of in terms of failure are in the Big Peace.
This day, I had the pleasure of meeting a cast member from the movie and an iconic Titanic historian. It was awesome to meet Fanny Brett. She played Benjamin Guggenheim's mistress, Madame Aubert, in the Titanic film. And she is now currently very like a heavy hitter in the voiceover world. She's a casting director, and she works on, she's also a director of various voiceover projects. And I got to sit down and talk to her, tell her about my kids and their careers. And she is so sweet, so generous with her time. She wanted to sit and get to know me and talk about, she law enforcement even, and having kids in the industry. And she was just very sweet, very humble, and just so connected. And she has actually stayed in touch since the conference, and she has booked Everly on some different voiceover projects, which has been super amazing. And she's going to be a guest on my podcast here very soon. I also got to meet legendary Titanic historian Don Lynch, one of the most highest regarded Titanic historians. His books, Titanic: An Illustrated History and Ghosts of the Abyss, are cornerstones of Titanic literature. James Cameron actually hired him to be the on-set historian, fact-checker, consultant for the film when they were making it. He also appeared as the historical figure Frederick Spedden, the father of the boy spinning the top on the deck. He said he'd be on the podcast. I reached out to him since then and haven't heard back, but hopefully we get to talk to Mr. Lynch very soon right here on COVE. At the end of the day, I met up with the family. We found a fun sports bar restaurant at the MGM called Tap. It was a fun, family-friendly environment with cold beer, which was very refreshing at the end of a hot desert day. The kids loved this place. I got the Reuben sandwich and it was delicious.
I suggest you try the Tap Sports Bar because it was just beyond. The food, we went twice, and the food was just so good. I couldn't breathe for a second.
You need to go to the hotel.
We taught Jamie how to play some taco, cat, goat cheese pizza to end the night. And get ready for the third and final day of the conference, Friday, August 11th. The last day began with a second opportunity for guests to experience the artifact exhibit. This was very cool because after hearing about the recovery and preservation of the big piece all week, we got to visit it again. So starting and ending the conference with a visit through the artifacts and to take in the big piece was really, really special, and really appreciated that. And especially great because Jamie missed it the first day, so she got to go through now. That morning, I also got to meet movie cast member Mark Capri, who played the steward who, in a panic, tries to save Rose and gets punched in the nose for it. He is one of the featured cast members in the documentary Ship of Dreams Titanic Movie Diaries, and it was really great to meet him. He's a very nice guy. At the midday break, no one was ready for some lunch yet, so we went out searching for some fun. A coworker of mine had recommended I take the kids to a place called the Pinball Hall of Fame, which happened to be right near the Luxor, and what a great recommendation it was. This place was a huge warehouse filled with vintage and modern pinball and arcade games. The Pinball Hall of Fame is 25,000 square feet, where the entire family can enjoy non-violent pinball arcade games for small dinero. All machines are available for play, so not only can you see them, as in like a museum, but you can actually play your old favorites. The pinball machines are restored to like-new playing condition by people that love pinball and understand how a machine should work. All older pinball machines are set to 25 cents per play, and newer models are set to 50 cents. And it's a far better return on fun than any Las Vegas casino environment you can find. And the Pinball Hall of Fame actually has windows and a clock in the room. It takes more than a slot machine to keep tourists happy, and the Pinball Hall of Fame is trying to do just that. I can attest to the fun and the value. We spent a good hour in there playing pinball, air hockey, skee ball, all for under $20, which is a crazy value in Vegas. After this, I returned to the conference, and Jamie took the kids out to lunch and to see the new Ninja Turtles movie, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem.
The Ninja Turtle movie was so fun. I think if you haven't watched it yet, you definitely should. It's like about how, if you've seen the live-action Ninja Turtle movie, it's a very different concept.
Yeah, but we don't want to spoil it because we want you to watch it.
Yeah.
Back at the conference, the final stretch of presentations began with a Q&A over Zoom with Charles Haas, co-founder and president of the Titanic International Society. Charles made dives to the Titanic wreck in 1993 and 96 and was a member of the 98 expedition and the Big Piece recovery. He has contributed to the design of artifact exhibits and co-authored 5 renowned Titanic books, including Titanic, Triumph and Tragedy. A highlight of this Q&A was when Frank Goldsmith III introduced himself to Charles. Charles had met Frank's father, who, if you remember, was a Titanic survivor, but this was the first time meeting Frank III. Even though it was over Zoom, it was still super special to see this meeting. And, the internet has a truly magical way of connecting people. Next, cast members from the movie got up to tell stories from set, including our friend Judy Preston-Incy. She talked about how James Cameron came to call her his bloody dead chick on set. Leonardo DiCaprio's stand-in, Gary DeLellis, was there to tell some stories from set. Very fun. David Knopf, who played a stoker or a fireman in the engine room, and a couple other extras. He had a very entertaining PowerPoint presentation filled with Titanic memories and memes. Fanny Brett told the story about how she got the job, her audition, and talking to James Cameron, and how her character, Madame Aubert, actually had a scene in the original script from the lifeboat. She was screaming for Guggenheim, who was on the ship that was going down, and how this whole scene was cut during production. It wasn't even filmed due to them going over time and over budget. Very interesting stuff. And Mark Capri, I mentioned I met earlier in the day, he read from his diary and talked about how Titanic was the second half of Titanic was the best action disaster film ever made. The whole film was completely ruined by the love story, which I know some people think, but obviously I disagree with you, Mark. After these cast presentations, we were treated to some live music. Mackenzie Bell is a young but already very accomplished fiddle player. She has a few albums out and was recognized as the Georgia State Fiddle Champion in 2019 when she was just 14 years old. Here at the con, she played Irish jigs and some other tunes that passengers on the Titanic would have enjoyed and experienced on the voyage. It was an awesome addition to the lineup of presenters. Of course, you know how much I appreciate live music. Next, Titanic cast member Louis Abernathy told us all about his Titanic journey. Of course, we all know him as Louis Bodine from the movie, and this was actually a role that James Cameron wrote for him. Even though through all of his life he had tried not to be an actor, his goal was always to find roles behind the camera. And he met James Cameron and Bill Paxton in film school, and the three of them were friends ever since. Louis talked about how he actually wrote one of the very first drafts of the Titanic screenplay, which Cameron basically almost completely rewrote himself. But he did say that the one biggest part of his draft of the screenplay that stuck and made it to the final film was the heaven scene, the final staircase climb where Rose reunites with Jack at the clock. I mean, that's a pretty huge part of the final cut, so great contribution, Louis. Thank you for that. The final official presentation was from Bob Anderson, the owner of Classic Worldwide Productions, who was instrumental in broadcasting all the live television shows from the 1996 Titanic expedition. He acted as the engineer, editor, anchor, and more, working tirelessly to produce unforgettable memories for the many, many observers who listened to his interviews and descriptive play-by-play of the initial attempt of the Big Piece recovery. As a producer of live entertainment myself, it was fascinating to hear all about his work and his experiences. The finale of Titanic Conference 2023 was a memorial to all who lost their lives on Titanic. The Willards played a video tribute, and then Judy Willard led us all in singing the hymn, Nearer My God to Thee. This was a really nice moment to be a part of, and in my opinion, the perfect way to end the conference.
Three wonderful days. 3 days of wonderful speakers. And it still boils down to remembering people with dreams that didn't have a chance to finish them, to fulfill them. Until next year, I bid you thanks.
Everyone who was still there at the end gathered for a big group photo, and that was officially the end of this amazing Titanic experience. And I want to just take a quick moment to say thank you to Bill Willard, if you ever watch this, and Judy, thank you for being so warm, welcoming, accommodating, and for hosting such an amazing event, being so wonderful to the entire Carganilla family. We'll never forget this week, and thank you so much. I walked back to our hotel and met up with the family, and we walked the strip for a bit so we could get some photos of Noah wearing his new shirt, which had a picture of him in his broccoli commercial and says, "I'm here for the broccoli." We got some pretty epic shots of him, but it was hot, so we surrendered back inside. The kids wanted to return to Tap for dinner, and we didn't fight it. It was close and easy and delicious. I tried the crispy chicken sandwich this time, and it didn't disappoint. The next morning, we packed up and said goodbye to our room, said goodbye to Las Vegas. We stopped briefly on the way home in Baker so the kids could see the largest thermometer in the world, but then we headed home.
Our trip to Vegas was amazing. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode coming along with us. Bye! Bye!
That concludes our very first ever Cove Podcast travel blog. Let us know what you thought. Leave us a comment on the YouTube video or a review on your favorite podcast platform. I got a few more coming down the pike. I'm editing a recent work trip. I took solo to Nashville, my first time in Nashville, and Jamie and I took our annual winter trip to New York City, and those videos are going to be a lot of fun. Stay tuned. Make sure you're subscribed for those. And as I get to do every month, I want to say thank you to our Cove curators, Angelica Bolschweiler, Anna Gina Vola, Charity Swanson, Emily Thatcher, Gina Dobbs, Jamie Carganilla, Josepha Snyder, Kelsey Blaine Gibson, Krista King, Meryl Milkey, The Farrens, and Susan Kuhn. I appreciate everything you do to help this show keep going and growing. Love y'all. We'll see you next week with something entirely different.